So, hello and welcome to another episode on the Cybersec Migrant. This is probably going to be our last episode for this year. So, if you're watching this right now, it's happy holidays. If you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. If you don't, enjoy the holidays. And I'm hoping that you have a great time for the next year. But before that, I actually wanted to talk about our episode today. Today, I have a very exciting guest. It's very apt because we were just talking about in-house here about our most successful episode this year. And our most successful episode this year was talking about women in cybersecurity, particularly two immigrant women who, killing it, if I could use that word, in their roles in cybersecurity here in Canada. And so my guest for today is another woman. She's technically not an immigrant, but she's second generation, maybe?
I'm first.
First generation. Okay, first generation. My bad. Apologies. So my guest today is Geraldine Okon. And Geraldine, welcome to the Cybersec Migrant.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I'm glad to have you here. So, first things first, I know a bit about you. And for anyone who is on LinkedIn, they would know you pretty well because you're pretty active on LinkedIn. Okay. But for those who don't know you, tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and what sort of sparked your interest in cybersecurity?
Okay, so a little about me, I guess not by looking at me, but I started out in IT about 20 years ago. And so I went in fresh out of high school. I did like a technical program because I wanted to start working right away. And so I have been in the field long enough to see the introduction of new technologies, whether that's virtualization, whether that's the cloud. I've seen just about everything. I've seen the rise and fall of different types of certifications. I remember when A+ was the thing to have, and then your MCSB, and all of the changes in between. And so at this point, I can see when people introduce things, but then they put a new name on it for technologies that have been around for a long time. So I've been in the game for quite some time. Most of my roles have been on the technical side of IT. And then I decided to pivot over into cybersecurity back in 2017. The reason for that is because I felt that there was a stopping point being in IT. I was a sysadmin. That was the point that I got to. And I started from the very bottom, even below help desk. I did something called, I was a computer operator. And many people may not even know what that is. A computer operator deals with backup tapes for something called like AS400s, these huge mainframes for a tandem. And so that's where I started. And from there, I went to help desk. I did desktop support. I was a sysadmin. I worked with Lotus Notes and Exchange. And so then I decided, I was like, okay, there isn't that much of a difference between a new server build that comes out. So I'm going to move over into security because I found that security was very multifaceted and it changes on a consistent basis. And it was I saw it more from a mental standpoint, because as you know, the user unfortunately is the weakest link. And just finding out how attackers can be able to compromise a environment, whether that's through social engineering, whether that's through phishing emails, it's just a lot to it. And just, even though I went into it in 2017 and maybe compared to other people, they may like, oh, well, you haven't been in cybersecurity for so long. But I see it from the standpoint, there's always new things to learn. Yeah. And even up to recent, I got an offer to go to a conference for ISC and OT technology. And I actually learned about that at DEF CON. And I met a lady that told me about it. Yeah, and she posted on her LinkedIn about a scholarship opportunity to attend. And I was like, okay, well, I know some of the attacks are very similar, but I didn't have experience with cybersecurity from, systems that deal with whether electrical plants or water companies, at that type of scale, to just see how an attack can just bring down those types of systems, which affects everybody. So that's the reason why I have a love for technology. I still do a CTF, so I don't think anybody's ever too old or too experienced to do CTFs. I think it helps to keep that thinking going. And I've done that this year as well. I did quite a few. I did one with our local B-sides here in New York. And then I did one at Amazon for 2 days, and that was fun. And I think at this point in my career, I also want to be able to give back, and I like to see the enthusiasm of college students or even high schoolers or people who are career changers. I love to see career changers coming over into cybersecurity from just different industries and just seeing that enthusiasm. And I think that's what kind of keeps me going and in the field. So, yeah, I have a love for technology, and that's why I've been doing this for the last 20 years.
That's a great 20 years. I'm wondering how long have I been in the industry? It's actually not up to 20 years. It's a little less than 20 years. But again, one of the things I find interesting as you were speaking, as you were talking about your story, is many times I speak to people and they say, I want to get into cybersecurity, but I am not technical. And, I always ask them, what exactly do you mean by you're not technical? Because I say to
Mhm.
people, if you can pick up a NIST publication or an ISO standard document and you can read that and understand that, why would you say you're not technical? Because those are technical documents. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to see someone who is a woman again, of color, say, I'm a technical person. I started out as a technical person because most times it's usually like women can be technical, but again, I'm happy to sort of, you see you as an example to hold up as someone who is breaking those stereotypes. I'll come back to that in a bit, but you said something while you're speaking about incident response, and threat management and all of that. What are some misconceptions, over the years, especially someone who was outside of cybersecurity but in technology and then moving into cybersecurity? What are some misconceptions that people have about incident response and threat management, both on the plus side and on the minus side, on the inside and the outside? What do people think about it? What have you noticed in the last 20 years?
I think what misconceptions are is that an incident is constantly going on all of the time and it is something scary, and it's not. And I think when an incident is going on, it's best to keep a level head. Yes, there is, a threat that's come into the environment. But when you work with your team and you're going through the different steps of, containing, say, for example, there's malware on someone's machine, you're trying to contain it the best way that you can, and you're going through the proper procedures, it's not as difficult as people may think. You just have to keep a level head. And it's just really the key thing is whether it's cybersecurity or IT, you must have team skills. You must be able to work in a team environment because those are
Mm-hmm.
the people that you're going to be relying on, especially when you're working in an incident. And that's the same
Yeah.
even with insider threat. I mean, we're all working together. And sometimes you may see things that your coworkers may not see, and vice versa, when there's a threat that's come into the environment. So it's I want people not to be scared to come into the environment. If you have worked in any field before and you're working with a team, you already have those skills. And learning technical skills, it should not be scary. I think what a lot of people they get scared about is that, oh, I have to know how to code. And I mean, there's different areas in cybersecurity where it's not necessary that you have to know how to code. And I mean, even if you do decide to code, there are coding languages like Python that are not that difficult to learn. But I want people not, I feel like people get scared because they see all the terminology and all the things that you may have to learn. But I feel like you should take it one step at a time, learn your basics first. And I'm always going to tell people, learn the basics. And some people tell you, oh, you don't have to have experience to get into cybersecurity. And I feel like that's a huge misconception.
True.
If you're going the technical route, yes. If you are coming from, let's say you are in accounting and you're doing auditing, that would be an easy transition to go into the auditing side within security. So it depends on what you're trying to get into, where you would need certain skills. So if you're in the technical aspect, yes, you need to understand the basics of how computers work.
Yeah, that's true. And I like what you said about, people saying you don't need an experience. Because like you said, it's a misconception because there's a context to saying you don't need experience. You have to understand, or explain what exactly is that context, because don't just say you don't need experience. I'm not going to take anyone just off the street and throw them into my sock right away and say, come work, you don't need experience. It doesn't work like that. Changing track a little bit. I was reading something from, I think we both know her, Confidence Stavely.
Yes.
She's one of the cybersecurity leaders on the African continent, and she had this very interesting stat a couple of days ago that even despite the growth in cybersecurity, particularly on the African continent, women only make up about 9% of the workforce. Now, I don't have the stats for North America right now off the top of my head. I know it is less than 50%. I think in Canada it's about 30%. That is somewhere between 27 and 30%, I think, that is women in the industry. Here's you, a woman, person of color. What has your experience been like? What has your experience been like? Challenges, advantages? What have you found surprising, in that industry, particularly in the US, which is, one of the biggest industries globally in cybersecurity? But what's it like as a woman and a person of color? Because those are two huge barriers at the same time.
My goodness. I will say that the organizations that I'm seeing now for women getting into cybersecurity are a lot more than when I started. And so I feel like that's going in a positive direction. But I am still seeing that the numbers, I think here in the US, in cybersecurity, women make up 25% of cybersecurity roles. I would like to see that increase. And then we break that down to Black women, it's even less. And as far as in managerial roles, Black women make up less than 1% of managerial positions within tech. And I'm sure it's even far less within cybersecurity. I could probably count on my hand how many Black women CISOs that I've met. It's not, the numbers are not
Very
there.
common.
And I feel like the reason for that, there is an implicit bias when it comes to women in the industry, especially Black women. And there is that ceiling I see for Black women, because even with myself, I've been in roles before where I know my job, I know what it is that I'm doing, and I'm like, okay, I want to do things that are more challenging because I don't want to stay in this role for years and years. And then you're being constantly met with no. And so I've kind of learned over time that if you are somewhere, and I've had conversations with people, if you're in a role for 18 months and you don't see any progress where you're moving up, you're not being paid properly, it's time for you to go. Because after a while, you're going to probably end up getting stagnant. And then it probably may be a little harder for you to move into other roles. That's my advice as well. And I think women are unfortunately intimidated going into cybersecurity, because I've witnessed that. I've been to conferences before and I've seen women there, they're there, but they're timid to ask questions because maybe people feel that they don't know what they're talking about. And it can be intimidating. I'm not intimidated now because I'm accustomed to it, because many times I'm the only woman on my team. I'm the only or Black woman. There's many times I've been the only Black woman on my team. They're not even white women or other races of women. That's what it's been. So at this point in time, being in the space where I am seeing more progress for women's organizations in cybersecurity, I couldn't have dreamed about that back in 2003. And I wish that those organizations existed, because maybe my mentoring opportunities for having a mentor would have been much different, or being able to access sponsors. So at this point in time, I want to be more in that space to help people get into the industry, to, say, hey, don't make these mistakes that I did. And I'm not the type of person where it's like, well, it was hard for me, so I'm not going to help the next person get into the industry.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
That happens a lot, unfortunately. Yeah.
And I'm gonna say this, and it may be slightly controversial, but I feel there are times where sometimes people of color, and I had this conversation with a woman who, when I did my AI bootcamp, her name is Angela, and we were discussing this. She's Latina. And so I said to her, sometimes when you're a person of color, sometimes you may not always want to open the door for other people to come in because you want to be the only one. And so I asked her, I said, has this been your experience as well? And she responded, she said, yes, sometimes it is like that. And so me personally, I want to see more women of color, more Black women, even women in general, come into the field, because that brings that unique perspective.
It does. Yeah, it does. It certainly does. I think you're right. There's a lot of gatekeeping around some of these things, particularly against Black women, against people of color. And I don't advocate for violence, but I think that door should be broken down. I don't think we should keep that door closed anymore. I think it's high time. Hey, Cybersec Migrant listeners, if you're enjoying the show, help us spread the word. Share the Cybersec Migrant podcast with your friends, your colleagues, and your network. It's the best way to help others discover our awesome content and to join the conversation. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and any other place where you get your podcast, so you never miss an episode. And do hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Your support helps us keep bringing you more valuable content, insights, and stories, and all these tips from the world of cybersecurity. And thank you for tuning in. And now, let's get back to today's episode. But again, you said something about mentorship, and that's something that's in recent months and years, we've been finding, even generally across the industry, irrespective of what your race is or what your gender is, mentorship is very important. How would you say mentorship has influenced your career? And what advice would you give to those looking to become mentors themselves? You're a mentor already. What can you share?
I mean, from my standpoint as being a mentor, so I mentor with WiCyS, which is Women in Cybersecurity. And so that's something that I actually did this year. It's not something that I thought I would ever be. And I think sometimes, even at this point, imposter syndrome starts to come into play. And for me, it's like, I want to make sure that when I have my sessions with my mentees, like I'm fully organized. I even do PowerPoint presentations so that we cover all the topics. I reach out to them outside of our sessions to make sure that they have the resources that they need. And so from my standpoint as a mentor, I want to be someone that can help people with resources, whether it's to get into the next cohort or go to that conference that they're interested in, or connect them with people who, like, for example, I always post about entry-level roles within cybersecurity. I'm not entry-level, but I'm mentoring with people that are trying to get into the industry. And so I've met with other people for like coffee chats where I'm meeting people who have master's and bachelor's degrees in computer science and cybersecurity, and they're struggling to get in there. They're seeing the posts that are asking for 5 years for an entry-level role with a CISSP. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
Makes no sense.
So I don't want them to get down on themselves and feel like I'm not doing enough. And I've just seen, the industry change. I don't know if it's because you have those out there that say, oh, you can get into the industry with no experience and make 6 figures a year, which I think maybe that's coming into play. Yeah, it's not true. And I don't know if that's causing things to be more difficult for people to get. But at the same time, you also have to let in your early career people, your college graduates, even your people who are currently in college, because that is the next generation. People can maybe figure out my age by now, but I'm like, you cannot hold a spot forever. People are going to retire. That's just what's going to happen. And so you have to leave a pathway for these people to get into cybersecurity and IT. And even at the IT level, it was easier for me to get a help desk role than what I'm seeing now. And I'm trying to figure out, is it more people coming into the field, or are we putting barriers so that, certain people are not coming in? And I will say this as well. This is what I've experienced over the course of my career. And there's a saying that's, black and brown on the bottom and white on the top. And so what that means is, down at the bottom, your help desk, your desktop support, when you go into cybersecurity, your SOC, that is where you're finding the diversity. And as you start to move up further, it gets less and less. And so I feel like all of those levels should have diversity there, because I've seen way too many times where you have those people who have gotten that first role and they're trying to move up, and there are other people who are coming in after them and being able to move up, and they have the same skill set. They're doing all of what they need to do, and they're still being kept down. And the only option is for them to leave.
Yeah, true. I completely agree. I think sometimes, and just like you said earlier, I tell the people, if you are in a role, you aren't finding any growth, you think you're stagnating, and there are no opportunities for you to actually grow in that role, then maybe you shouldn't be in that role. Maybe you should be looking for somewhere else. Because I think the only way you can stay relevant in an industry like ours, for example, is you have to constantly learn, you have to constantly improve, because everything is changing. I was looking at some information. I was doing some work, and I was looking at some of the, the structure, some of our databases and some of the characters we use, and I was like, when we designed this a few years ago, it was accurate, but right now there's so much more that we need to do. We need to go back and do a whole revamp. And that's just in the
Mhm.
short span of 5 years. So imagine what it's
Exactly.
going to be like in 3 years or in 2 years from now, because everything is changing and it just gets more and more, more and more complicated. And the pace of which things change is really, really fast. So it's important to actually, stay relevant. So I think it's important, like you said, for us as individuals in this space to actually um, continue to stay relevant, continue to do the best we can. I want to ask you a question, and this is something that it's a bit of a conversation point within the industry. People talk about certifications. The best way to improve your experience, to get this role is to take all the certifications. CISSP, CCSP, CISA, all of that. And some people say no, practical experience is what you need to do. You know, how do you balance both of them? I know, again, some people are in one camp, some people are in other, some people are in none. But what's your thought on certification versus practical experience? How do you get a balance? How do you keep it together?
That's a good question. So I feel at this point in time, I mean, I'm fine with getting certifications, and I feel like it is helpful. And I've seen it in different situations where someone has a security plus and they don't have a bachelor's degree, but they've gotten the role over someone who has a bachelor's degree. And so I don't see any issues with it there. Now, if somebody has 20 years of experience in cybersecurity, is it really necessary that they need a CISSP? Yes, it's nice to have, but are you going to take someone with maybe the 5 years of experience in security with a CISSP or someone who has 20 years plus in cybersecurity? You're going to probably go with the person who has more practical experience
Yeah,
because I've
that's
seen
true.
both. So it really depends because you have some people who have not gone the traditional route where they've gone to college, but they can set up a home lab. They are very hands on. They have put in the work. Now, I come from, I guess, when I started out, I met a lot of people who were like that. They had a lot of experience, and that's how they got into the field. And they didn't have to go through the traditional route of getting certifications. And I think certifications are good in some ways, but people also have to take a look at the certifications that they are getting because of the costs that are associated with them. I have
Yes.
I have a cost. I have like an A plus from back in 2010. At that point in time, they didn't expire, and now you have to redo certifications every 3 years
Every
now,
three
and then there are
years.
fees associated with them. So I do think certifications are good, yes, but you also have to look at the value of the certification. And these certifications go up in popularity too, because one day the CISSP might not be the golden standard.
True,
CEH at one
true.
point was, and now it's not. So I think people also need to take time and see the value of these certifications and say, okay, I'm going to get the Security Plus because this is what's being asked for right now. And this is a foundational certification as opposed to one that is not. So I think people just have to kind of look at what certifications are relevant to them that can help them get into the industry. But at the same time, if you're getting the certifications, also invest in hands on experience. Because anybody, for the most part, most people can study and do a multiple choice exam. But if you don't have the hands on experience to back that up,
It makes no sense then. Yeah,
yeah.
I agree. Like the CISSP, for example, I think one of the requirements to get the CISSP, well, apart from writing the exam, is 5 years of experience. And I know people who have written the exam before having 5 years of experience. And I always wonder, why would you do that to yourself? Because it's a lot
Hmm.
harder then. If you wait to have the 5 years of experience before writing the exam, it's infinitely easier because those scenarios and those questions are likely to be scenarios you've encountered in the course of your job. So then you can understand it better than somebody who is like, I know somebody who recently we were speaking, he's looking to get into cybersecurity. And what he's done is go register for a boot camp to take the CISSP. I'm like, if you had asked me before you actually paid to take that boot camp, I would have said don't do that because that's not the
Hmm.
best way to do it. But you've already done this, okay, that's fine. You can throw that money away now. And it's a lot of money.
Yeah,
So
it
I think that's a
is.
bit of a challenge for many people. Someone said it's, managing certifications today, you have to have deep pockets to do that. So how then is it possible, or what would you advise in your experience is one of the ways to stay relevant, in this industry of cybersecurity, especially considering how it's constantly evolving and how it can be very pricey to actually stay relevant, to stay current. It can be pricey, taking bootcamp, all of that. What would be your, if someone said to you, hey, Geraldine, I need 3 tips from you on how can I stay relevant and still, not spend a ton of money, trying to stay relevant in this industry? What would you say? What would you advise?
So, this is what I would say. And I think a lot of people are not aware of these things. A lot of these large organizations have upskilling programs. So,
True.
you have your nonprofit. So, I'm with WiCyS, and they always have, programs going on where you can get your Google certificate from Coursera. Depending on where you live. I live in New York City. New York City has a lot of different programs for people who are trying to get into tech, where they will pay for certifications for you. The public library in New York City gives you access to LinkedIn Learning for free. So
Yeah.
I feel throughout my career, I haven't really paid a whole lot for training. And I was
Which is
blessed to
good.
be in New York, where when I came to New York back in 2010, the Workforce Development Center, they actually sent me for training at a technical institute to do my MCSA. They paid for the courses. It was a 3-month program. So the only thing I really had to pay for at the time was my exam fees, which at that time, much cheaper than what you see now.
True.
So I always tell people, I'm like, lean into social programs within your state, and also a lot of companies that are doing upskilling programs. I comb LinkedIn all the time. I see so many different opportunities there. I mean, even in New York, I've seen some organizations that will help you get your AWS certifications paid for free. So my advice to people is to utilize a lot of state resources that you have, nonprofit organizations that are, trying to reach out, and companies work with the nonprofits because that's a tax write-off. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's beneficial for them to help some of these nonprofit organizations. So I always tell people to utilize your nonprofits, look at what your state or your county is offering. Even going to, I'll say this, and some people may differ, if you're going to a 4-year university. But I feel a lot of times the technical and the community colleges have a lot of programs that help people to get those certifications, because they, a lot of times, depending on the school, they have tracks where you're doing these programs to help you to get a job. And the instructors that are there, a lot of times they work part-time as instructors and they work full-time in the industry. And sometimes they are some of the best people to network with, to find out
Yeah.
about different programs. And I think the third thing as well is to expand your network, connect with other people. Because another thing on LinkedIn, when you connect or even follow people, they put out resources that may be for you. So I'll give an example. So the Tech Equity Collective, which is through Google, they have a 8-week cohort for career prep. And so those types of programs can also help people to get career resources, and they're free. They're not things that you have to pay for. There's another organization that I met when I went to Atlanta for a conference called Render ATL. The group is called Resilient Coders. And so that is a program specifically for Black and Brown people to get into a program to learn how to code. And they help with training and job placement as well. So there are different organizations out there, Black Girls Hack, Blacks in Cybersecurity, just different organizations out there that will help you get in there as far for underrepresented groups. So I feel like
That's
the resources are out there. If you're able to properly network with people, you can find out about it. Because I tell anybody, for the most part, if I want some type of training, I'm not spending an arm and a leg for it. And I'll give you an
no.
example too. I'll give you an example. When I was in DC last week, they had SANS training at the hotel I was staying at, and everybody in the industry knows how expensive SANS training is.
Yes, that is true.
If you get that type of training, always have your employer pay for it, because I don't know most people that can pay $10,000 out of pocket to take SANS training. So I tell
I don't know
people,
anyone to.
yeah,
That's a lot of money. It is a lot of
yeah,
money.
it is, yeah.
It is a lot of money. I like what you said there, because I actually also know that many vendors and many cybersecurity platform providers, what have you, Microsoft, Google, even the other, identity vendors, SIEM vendors, all of those vendors, they have mostly free resources for you to learn how their platforms work. Sign up for an AWS account, sign up for a Google GCP account, you know, or Azure. You can go in there, learn with these things. What you're doing at that time is you're understanding how the environment works. You're getting hands-on training. It's always good on your resume to say, hey, I've spent some time in this environment. I know how to configure, this in the cloud or what have you. And again, most important thing, and something you mentioned there earlier, is it's important to network. It's important to actually connect with people, because if you, like I tell people, if you know everything, if you're so smart, the smartest person in the room, but nobody knows about that, you're really not the smartest person in the room if no one knows. So again, just to, I know we spent some time here, but just sort of to start to bring it together. If someone was talking about, so how would you advise, now, knowing all that you've done, with all that you've said, all the good things you've said, what would you advise, other women or people of color looking to break into cybersecurity, wondering, how do I start my career? How do I network? What would be, what advice would you give to people saying, hey, this is what you should do when you're networking. This is what you should do, to build your skills. This is what you do to, make sure that you're being seen and heard to get you positioned for them to offer you that role. What would you say?
So I would say this, and I think the best advice is to volunteer. And I volunteered for WiCyS, and I volunteered for an organization called Women in Cybersecurity and Privacy. And I think that is another way. That's one of the best ways to network. That's the best way to find out about resources. And another thing as well, when you are volunteering, find organizations that you enjoy volunteering for. Because it's just like if you're working at a regular job. Some companies are disorganized. You don't like working there. That's the same thing when you're also volunteering as well. So find organizations that are reputable, that treat their volunteers well, and that you enjoy volunteering with them. And I'll say another one as well, ISC too. I've met people from their New Jersey chapter. They actually, when I went to a conference, they actually reached out and they said, would you like to join our chapter? These are all the things that we do. And I even got some good advice from the person who does their social media. She said to me, you know what? Use these reputable organizations like ISC2, volunteer with them, and use them on your LinkedIn to market yourself. And I was like, that's some really good advice, because that shows that you are active in the field. You are going out there on a regular basis, and it's work experience as well. Those are skills that you can put on your resume as well. And they also may help you get into internship programs. They help with cybersecurity pathways. So I would always say that to people, is to get out there and volunteer with established nonprofits.
Yeah, that's always good. I think, like you rightly said, volunteer with those that are going to actually show you as, somebody who has the experience, so ISE2, ISACA, WiCyS is great, particularly for women. A couple of my contacts recently got that scholarship that WiCyS just gave out to attend that conference next year. So I'm very excited for that.
Yeah,
that's right. You see, there we go.
I know it.
Yeah, exactly. So hey, there you go. So WiCyS, there's always things to benefit, and I can, like rightly said, volunteer with an organization where you love what you're doing there. Because I tell people, if you're going to work at the job and spend 8 hours of your day every day, sometimes more, working at a job, it better be somewhere you love working.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you're just going to hate it. Because every morning you're going to wake up and be like, oh, I'm going there again. But you want to be like, yes, I'm going there again. That's what I think it should be. But it's been so nice chatting with you today, Jordan. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been great to hear your experience. And again, like you rightly said, looking at you, no one's going to know that you've got 20 years of experience. So kudos, I doff my hat. You need to tell us what your secret is, because I know many people who, one of the biggest things they say about this field is it's a very stressful field, and it is. I was working last night till very late, and I started very early this morning. Sometimes some days I get barely 6 hours of sleep. So it's really a tough industry. But we love it. That's how we do it, right?
I'm with you there. I've had my on-call, waking up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to take calls, go back to sleep, get woken up again. So it is. I mean, it can be stressful, but at the same time, I think for me is when I was at Black Hat and I was volunteering, and I saw that enthusiasm of the women that were there, and even like the CTFs that I've done as well, like seeing that enthusiasm for people who are in the field, and that kind of brings it all back. The reason why I went into it in the first place. Despite the frustrations and just the crazy stuff that I've experienced, and I think that's a conversation for another day.
It
But
is. It is. Yeah.
yeah, I truly like being in cybersecurity and IT. It's just the amount of things that I can learn, and just seeing how just over this 20 years how things have progressed, and like the things that people can do. And even with like AI, I mean, this it's
Yeah.
disruptive.
It's a new one.
It's completely disruptive technology, and I'm so interested in just the way that it's going to go. And I feel that people, especially those who are coming from underrepresented groups, should lean in and learn this, because this is a pathway to take you to the next level in a career. Or if you're going the entrepreneur route, that can help you establish different types of businesses. So I tell anybody, do not be afraid of AI. Yes, there is going to be bias built into it, but at the same time, if more people of color are utilizing AI, they can have control over how they're being represented.
Absolutely. Yes. We don't it's not going to get better if we stay away from it. So we've got to put our inputs in. That's what will help us reduce the bias in there. But it's been really nice talking to you today, Geraldine. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to put a link to Geraldine's profile in the comments down below, so you can connect with her on LinkedIn. She also gives out lots of very great nuggets every day on LinkedIn. So you will do well to follow her so you can get those comments. Any final words before we close?
Any final words? Final words for just about anybody. If you have interest in going into cybersecurity, do not be afraid. Understand that there are resources. Reach out to people, follow them, ask questions. Always ask questions. And I don't think there's anybody who is going to be the smartest person in the room. But always ask questions. Have that motivation and that intensity to say, hey, I belong here. I want to learn. I want to be a part of this community. And reach out to people that you see are active, and just sit down and say, okay, can I have a coffee chat with you? I want to learn more about this industry, and just make, meaningful connections. So I think those are the last words that I would leave.
Yeah. So meaningful connections. And there you have it, people. Always make meaningful connections. Whatever your career is, cybersecurity or anywhere else, meaningful connections will always get you through and take you to the next level. Thank you so much, Geraldine, for coming on today. It's been great. This has been another episode of the Cybersec Migrant. And until next time, this is Femi signing off. Thank you.
Thank you.